Hi everyone, I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Mary with MaryGreeley News. Ever since humans have evolved from hunter-gatherers and following along the different groups of migrating animals, people have developed the skill how to store food during time of plenty for when there is no food to be found. A lot of animals, you might be surprised, also do this. Panthers, beavers, birds, all kinds of different birds, and different types of rodents, such as hamsters and squirrels. The western scrub jay is noted for catching or caching large hordes of different foods, which it often defends. It scatters its hordes in multiple caches. A jaguar will hang its partially eaten prey from a tree to be eaten within a few days, or long term, where food is hidden and often retrieved months later. Caching is a common adaptation to seasonal changes in food availability. For species that hoard perishable food, weather can be a significant effect upon the accumulation, use, and rotting of the stored food. This phenomenon is referred to in the fable of the ant and the grasshopper. The tyra, which is a member of the weasel family in Central America, has been observed to harvest whole green plants, hide them, and then come back later to eat them after they have been ripened. Leaf-cutting ants harvest different types of plant and then cache them underground in chambers to let them ripen to become a fungus, which will be the main food source for the colony. Other types of birds that cache their food is chickadees, nuthatchers, titmice, blue jays, crows, and some woodpeckers. They all plan ahead and scatter hordes like squirrels. They don't put all their food in one place, but in multiple caches. It might be in areas underneath loose bark or knot holes or crevice of a tree, even in gaps of chimneys or sidings of a building. Moles are another type of animal that has caches. They dig up worms and then place them in the ground, and when the ground freezes, they are preserved. Chipmunks also have caches. They dig holes and put in piles of worms. You might wonder why the worms stay there. Well, moles evidently know where to bite a worm to paralyze it. So after getting bit, the worm is still alive and can last longer to be a food source for the moles. Shrews are also another one that stockpile worms. They have a venom that they inject into their prey that paralyzes them, but keeps them alive until the shrew is ready to eat the worms. Red squirrels store mushrooms. They set them up in branches until they dry, like jerky or raisins, and then they are collected so they can be ate later. Bobcats also store leftover food. They'll eat what they want and then cover them up with a layer of snow or dirt or leaves, any kind of covering that is best for hiding. That way their cache is stored for later. Foxes also store food. They'll hide things like bird eggs and bones to be consumed later. They'll bury them underneath a layer of dirt or leaves. Urban foxes have been known to hide food in flower boxes. More and more people are stockpiling. A recent survey in 2020 from FEMA found that there was a 6% increase over the year before estimate for people stockpiling food. What FEMA considers enough supply was they did a questionnaire. If they had at least 30 days of food and they could go 30 days without food or water or power if they were prepared, and they found back in 2020 that 68% of those surveyed were prepared for 30 days or longer. Ever since the pandemic in 2020, an emergency outbreak alert was put out by the WHO. More and more people are being prepared, becoming prepared after seeing the disruption in our services. Remember when all the ports were shut down, the shortages in the stores, different types of food and medication, things like that you couldn't get. 81% of those surveyed in 2020 had extra emergency supplies on hand. Can you believe that? 80% of those surveyed? 65% had sought preparation information. 84% had created an emergency plans. The survey also found that 68% of adults had set up or set aside some money for an emergency. 77% had homeowners or renter insurance, while 22% had flood insurance. More than 5,000 adults were surveyed during 2020. The survey was a national representative sample that also included hazard-specific samples for tornadoes, flood, hurricanes, wildfire, earthquake, and urban events. We all know that the global plan from the globalists is to reduce the world's population, and I think more and more people are waking up to that fact. They hate the fact that people are being becoming prepared for any type of disaster. The latest catchphrase from these globalists is called dread merchants. The definition means that it's a person who makes a living by predicting disasters and worst-case scenarios. It made me mad when I first heard the term dread merchant. It hampers those that want to learn more about preparing for disasters or who wish to buy supplies that would help us survive during a disaster. Each day, individuals and family routinely receive critical goods and services such as water, food, pharmaceuticals, medical goods, power, and fuel from a healthy, functional supply chain. It's not always a disaster that can affect our supply chain, as we saw with the shutdown of the ports during the pandemic. During a time of disaster, our supply chain can quickly become not just a disaster, but turn into a catastrophe. Most city and government response plans for a disaster is often based on the assumption of a supply chain working. I found one example of a supply chain breaking down from Alaska. That's when they had their earthquake in 1964. Alaska experienced a 9.2 earthquake and subsequent tsunami that hit, and it devastated its power infrastructure, shipping, and distribution network. Supply chains to Alaska primarily come to the mainland United States either by ship from Seattle, Washington to Anchorage, or by air. Originally called the Port of Anchorage, the infrastructure there began in 1961 and was the only port in south central Alaska that remained functional after the 1964 Good Friday earthquake. It has since transformed into the main conduit for essential supplies distributed across the state, from groceries and consumer goods to cement and fuel. The critical facility has been badly in need of repairs and design upgrades for decades due to, in part, harsh tidal conditions in Cook Inlet and pilings in silt and ice badly corrode the metal support and jeopardizes Alaska supply lines. Recently, there was upgrades that were supposed to go in place for the port, and there's been a lawsuit, a $367 million lawsuit, because of poor working, repairing, and upgrading for the port there. After the earthquake, FEMA came in and assessed how much food they had available to feed the Alaskans. And they found that they had only 4,000 meals, shelf-stable meals, for about 7 days. They also identified the need to store medical supplies, cold climate water purification systems, and generators. Even now, recent catastrophic logistic planning shows that Alaska has only 7 days of food available. That's if there was a disruption to the supply chain. The problem nowadays is that most stores have just-in-time inventory practices. They only order it once it's out and when they need it, expecting supplies to come within a few short days. They focus really a lot on technology systems and data exchange. If there was a cyber attack, like we've recently seen, that could impact the supply chain for ordering and delivery. Many of you probably heard about the law that Obama passed. I believe it was in 2017, and I looked into different things that they would do. The Secretary of Agriculture would be responsible for food resources facilities, livestock resources, veterinarian resources, plant health resources, and domestic distribution of farm equipment and commercial fertilizer. In the time of a national disaster, they would procure and install additional equipment, facilities, processes, or improvement to plants, factories, and other industrial facility owned by the federal government, and to procure and install government-owned equipment in plants, factories, or other industrial facilities owned by private people. Food resource facilities, which means plants, machinery, vehicles, including those that are on the farms, and other facilities required to or for the production, process, and distribution and storage, including cold storage for food resources and for domestic distribution of farm equipment and fertilizers. Civil or civilian transportation includes movement of persons and property by all modes of transportation in interstate, intrastate, or foreign commerce within the United States, its territories and possessions, and the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and related public storage and warehousing, ports, services, equipment, and facility, such as transportation carrier, shop, and repair facilities. Civil transportation also shall include direction, control, coordination of civil transportation capacity regardless of ownership. They would take over everything. The only thing they would not take over is transportation owned or controlled by the Department of Defense. Other things the government would take over is food resource facilities. Means plants, machinery, vehicles, including those on the farm, and other facilities required for the production, processing, distribution, and storage, including cold storage of food resources, and for the domestic distribution of farm equipment and fertilizers. I'll give you a link to all this down below. Yeah, we've often talked about, would they come into our homes and take our food supplies? Food resources also means potable water packaged in commercially marketable containers. All starches, sugars, vegetables, and animal or marine fats and oils, seed, cotton, hemp, and flax fiber. Health resources means drugs, biological products, medical devices, materials, facilities, health supplies, services, and equipment required to diagnose, mitigate, or prevent the impairment of, improve treatment, cure, or restore the physical or mental condition of the population. According to Section 303, Section B of the document, it says materials required under Section 303 of the Act 50 U.S.C. APP 2093 that exceed the need of the program under the Act may be transferred to the National Defense Stockpile if in the judgment of the Secretary of Defense and the National Defense Stockpile Management such transfers are in the public interest. So what they take from the factories and the farms and possibly your own home would be put into a national defense stockpile. So when I heard about the term being a dread merchant for different types of people who are warning you about disasters that could be coming, I mean, look at what's going on there in New York with the National Guard. They're preparing for something. Many, many years ago, I had a dream about a dirty bomb that was set off in Times Square, and it was a false flag. It was set off by our own military government. Maybe that's what they're looking for there in the subways with the military now. Over 1,000 National Guard, I believe, now checking bags. Might be a good reason not to be in an area where there's large amount of people in case some suicide bomber decides to detonate. There's been a lot of chatter too about our jet stream changing, and they're saying that towards the north and south poles that the winds are increasing and expected to increase, especially at ground levels. Here you can see recent reports about freak Atlantic jet stream winds pushes passenger plane to supersonic speeds. Near record winds in the northeast give passengers' flight a boost. Jet stream pushes planes at speeds nearly 840 miles an hour, shortest flight times. I'll give you a link to this article here, and it talks about the jet stream and the changes of the jet stream, and also the weakening of the magnetic pole and the coming pole reversal. There is some evidence to suggest that there may be a correlation between the flow of the jet stream and changes in the Earth's magnetic poles. There's also been talk about one day you're going to wake up and the sun's going to rise in the west. Have you heard about that? One article published in the journal Nature Geoscience in 2017 found that the jet stream shifted northward during the last geomagnetic reversal about 780,000 years ago. Another study published in the journal Geophysical Research Letters in 2019 found that the jet stream is more likely to meander during periods of a weak geomagnetic field. The weaker magnetic field makes the jet stream more susceptible to disturbance from other factors such as solar activity. Yeah, we're going into or starting the solar maximum. I keep an eye on the solar flares that occur, and it's been quiet for the last couple days, but it looks like we had one today that was an M7. That's the largest it's been in a while. I'll give you a link to this article down below. It was written by Tim McGinnis. He's got a PhD, a DIFIN, I have no idea, a senior partner, board member, advisor, public speaker, scientist, and a Navy veteran. So from that survey of over 5,000 people, 81% now are preppers. They got at least something saved up for a case of a disaster. And animals do it. We're no longer hunter-gatherers. And most stores, they say, have only about 3 days worth of food. We all saw the disruption in goods during the pandemic. And I don't think we have actually recovered from that. The shortage of goods and the inflation. I'm expecting hyperinflation. Stockpiling actually helps beat hyperinflation or inflation. Many people have been preparing for years and years. So yeah, you definitely got a heads up beating the higher costs of food nowadays. Canned goods have an indefinite shelf life. The sell best by date does not mean it's expired as long as the cans or jars still have their seals and no sign of rust or denting, heavy denting, will last indefinitely. Is there more to it with the National Guard there in the subways of New York, or is it just a test run for martial law? I don't know. But I have read to you, told you about how they will take control of everything from the farm to the factory and distribution for your food in the case of a disaster. And then there's the threat of war. So what are your thoughts? Put your comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please stay safe, and I'll talk to you later. God bless you. Bye.